Locked On Podcast Network presents Locked On Sports Today.
Robert Saleh is out in the Big Apple, but was any of this really his fault? And after getting a split in Philly, the Mets take full advantage in their return to Queens. Plus, if the Browns had any sense, they'd sit Deshaun Watson.
I'm Peter Bukowski, starting your day with the can't-miss stories and biggest debates in sports. You're Locked On Sports Today.
Searching all major sports. Found.
Let's start with the biggest story.
The Robert Saleh era in New York, such that it is over. After just 5 games and a 2-3 record, the New York Jets, helmed by owner Woody Johnson, had made the decision to move on from head coach Robert Saleh. John Butchko from Locked On Jets joins me now. And John, this is a defense that has performed well above what you would even want of a defensive coach. We're talking about one of the best defenses in the league over the last, 2.5 years. And yet now is the time that the Jets make this move when they still have a really good defense. Why was this the way that the New York Jets decided to go?
Well, you're right that the defense has been very good, but I think that speaks to one of the problems with Robert Saleh as a head coach is whenever somebody would ask me what are his good qualities, I would list things that you'd say about a defensive coordinator that, he's built a really good defensive infrastructure. He's worked well with the front office procuring players, that they've developed talent well on that side of the ball. And that's great if Robert Saleh is a defensive coordinator, but he's the head coach. And I think that after they lost in London on Sunday, there was a very telling comment by Quincy Williams, one of their star players on defense, who said that, he said something to the effect of, there needs to start being accountability here. The Jets have gotten off to slow starts in 4 of the 5 games this year. And I don't know how much of that goes to the head coach, but I think on some level you have to say when it's this consistent, when the team's coming out flat this frequently, it probably says something about the preparation. Look, I think that the issues with the Jets are far more complicated than this, but the record just was not good enough for Robert Saleh.
Okay. How do you hold a team accountable when you have given the team over to a 40-something quarterback coming off an Achilles injury who handpicked the offensive coordinator to run an offense that even Garrett Wilson hinted he's not really that into running? How do you have any accountability? How does Robert Saleh even do that when we all know he's not even really in charge?
You don't. And that's kind of the problem with the Jets right now. And, look, I don't think Robert Saleh was a very good head coach. I said frequently on Locked On Jets that I felt like he deserved to be fired, but there are far bigger underlying issues with this team right now. I think anybody who thinks that this is going to save the Jets season is in for a disappointment. And it's difficult for me to understand. You mentioned it, like the defense Saleh has built is very good. Now, he's a head coach. That might not be enough to save his job. The bigger issue the last couple of weeks has been the offense. Yeah. And the offensive coordinator's not been fired. The offensive line coach, Keith Carter, came from the Tennessee Titans and, had multiple players criticizing him when he left Tennessee. You've watched the Jets on film. I mean, they have offensive linemen who really don't understand their assignments. He's still here. So, the biggest problem with this team is the offensive side of the ball, and you didn't address that at all. It honestly feels to me, and this is like from covering the Jets as long as I have, it's something I'm used to. The Jets just wanted a sacrificial lamb, and they think that I think it was one thing you learn with the Jets, especially under this owner Woody Johnson, is they're always looking for this quick fix. They always think there's one move. They're one move away. There's this one silver bullet that we can do to fix everything that's wrong with the team. And it's not. And I think Woody Johnson views this as, we built this great roster. We have Aaron Rodgers. We have a Hall of Fame quarterback. This is a 13-win roster. It must be the head coach. Once we get rid of the head coach, everything's going to be fine. I don't think it works that way. I mean, firing Robert Saleh is not going to make Aaron Rodgers 7 years younger. If you're watching him play, his mobility is not what it used to be. He's making bad decisions. Firing Robert Saleh is not going to make the offensive line block better. That's, the players, and it's the offensive line coach who they kept in place. It's not going to make the offense more dynamic. The offensive coordinator is still in place. So, I think it's a fair question. I think the question ultimately reveals some of the issues with this Jets team.
Yeah, there's no Ozempic coming here for the New York Jets. Like they have an intractable weight problem, if we're going to carry out that metaphor here. But this to me feels like, to your point, this is a problem with the way this team was not just built. from a roster standpoint, but structured with the way that they gave Aaron Rodgers all of this control. And that seems to be at the feet of the GM and the owner. So they're not getting fired, apparently, and you're not going to fire the quarterback. To your point, it feels like Robert Saleh is the fall guy here.
He is, but I think the other side of this coin is that I don't think Robert Saleh would be here under any other circumstances. He missed the playoffs 3 straight years to begin his tenure.
He'd already be gone, you're saying.
Right, because, how many coaches miss the playoffs 3 straight years and are able to save their job? It could come up with a couple. I came up with Tom Coughlin, who won 2 Super Bowls with the Giants before. He missed the playoffs 3 straight years, but that was after he won 2 Super Bowls with the team. Robert Saleh hasn't had a winning season in 3 years as a head coach, so I think everything you're saying is accurate, but the thing is, I don't know any other coach who would have signed up for the Jets in this situation where, so much has been given to the quarterback, where so much control has been given to the quarterback. What first-year head coach is going to come in and take that job? So I think that's one of the reasons Robert Saleh was still here to start the season.
Stay up to date on the New York Jets all year long by subscribing to Locked On Sports Today and Locked On Jets on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. Thanks for making Locked On Sports Today your first listen. Coming up, the Mets are a win away from the NLCS. Before we get to that, the Dodgers and Padres moved their fiery series to San Diego. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. And you can place that bet on, how about the first game of week 6 of the NFL, for example. Thursday night features an NFC West rivalry game, the Niners and the Seahawks. FanDuel has Geno Smith and Brock Purdy pretty close in passing yards on their props. The total for Purdy's passing yards, 253.5, while Smith, 248.5. The passing game hasn't been consistently there for the beaten up Niners this year. I might be tempted to take Smith to have the most passing yards, which FanDuel has at even odds. So what are you waiting for? That's FanDuel.com to get started. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. After a beatdown in Game 2, the Padres took their momentum home with them to San Diego. It was up to the Dodgers to cool off the Padres' hot bats.
Wow. Yesterday's episode, I basically used yesterday's episode, especially because we didn't really have a game to talk about, just ranting, frankly. And I use that also because it's not like I have a lot of baseball analysis to do at this point. We kind of know what the series is until otherwise, right? We kind of have that and we kind of know what everything is. It's not like I have necessarily too much strategy or ideas or predictions or, oh, wait, the Padres just signed this guy. So that's kind of why I did that too. And it's crazy because after the last 72 hours, right, with the Padres and all the discourse, especially that was exacerbated because of the Dave Roberts incident and the unsettling, that's why I said that in the intro, the Manny Machado ball toss, and then the Ken Rosenthal article that really set it off even further. This was a highly anticipated game, and it did live up to the potential, at least in the beginning. This game absolutely goes bonkers at the very beginning, and I was just sitting back feeling if you guys know in Terminator 2, Judgment Day, when Sarah Connor is up against the fence and then she sees the nuclear blast or whatever, that's kind of what it was like watching this game at the beginning. And we got to talk about it because, look, frankly, heading into this game, as someone who is a sports media person, I don't want to say reporter, journalist, whatever, person is what I go by. It was interesting following yesterday the very intense, really fervent media bias in favor of LA. You saw it on the Fox broadcast where Derek Jeter, David Ortiz, Alex Rodriguez, they're kind of alluded to, yeah, the Padres, they like to be villains. They like to, annoy you and all that stuff, and they poke you and make you they love being the villain. And I was like, nah, y'all are making us the villain. Every other I'm just no one is talking about Jack Flaherty hitting Fernando Tatis Jr. or all the people throwing stuff at the players. It's just insane.
The number 3 overall pick is getting the nods for the Pats, according to a report from Adam Schefter. Drake May will try and be some good vibes that the New England Patriots desperately need against the Houston Texans this week. The Texans handed the reins to C.J. Stroud last year and had a resurgent season. The Patriots are mired in a 4-game losing streak and will move on from Jacoby Brissett as the offense is averaging a paltry 12.4 points per game. The idea, of course, would be that Drake May plays something like C.J. Stroud. May will now join Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, and Bo Nix as the 4th rookie quarterback to start a game this season. While one quarterback is beginning his season, another is on hold. Saints quarterback Derek Carr suffered an oblique injury that will keep him out indefinitely, according to reports. Carr suffered the injury in Monday night's loss to the Kansas City Chiefs. And hockey has come to Utah. The first official home game for the Utah Hockey Club took place on Tuesday night with Connor Bedard and the Chicago Blackhawks in town. The Utah franchise was the Arizona Coyotes last season.
History has been made in Salt Lake City after just a 6-month transition period from a sudden relocation from Arizona. The Utah Hockey Club has opened their inaugural season with a 5-2 win over the Chicago Blackhawks. All the love is felt tonight for Dylan Guenther, whose opening goal of his 2-goal night will forever be enshrined in UHC history as its franchise first goal. The win didn't come with some hiccups, however, as the defense certainly felt some pressure from Connor Bedard and company, but that's expected with a completely new blue line, rebuilt blue line, headed into Salt Lake this season. We're keeping up the analysis of Utah's historic first season on the Locked On Utah Hockey Club podcast. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
The NLDS shifted to New York, and the Mets at home get a 7-2 win over, let's be honest, the hated division rivals, the Philadelphia Phillies. Pete Alonso once again getting the big home run. Ryan Finkelstein from Locked On Mets joins me now. And Ryan, this is a team that I was talking to a friend of mine the other day about this, and he was saying this reminds them of some of those Tony La Russa Cardinals teams, that there's just a little Cardinals devil magic in this Mets team right now.
Yeah, man, it's been an unbelievable season for the Mets. They've been the best team in baseball since June, and now they're showing it against the team that was favored, because by the end of the season, the Phillies record was better. But I'll tell you what, the Mets proved down the stretch. They faced this team a couple times, played really tough against them. They showed that they could beat the Phillies, and so far, so good. This was 16 days waiting for the Mets fans to see this team again. They went on the road, very similar to the Rangers last year, who had to go through they finished the season on the road, and then they started the playoffs on the road. This was the same type of game for the Mets, a homecoming where everything went their way. Great start by Sean Manaea, and the offense just delivered time and time again.
Yeah, you mentioned Manaea in this one. 7 innings, just 3 hits and 1 earned. Anytime in a postseason, you can just have 3 pitchers in the box score. That's usually a good sign for the Mets. And this is a team that, when you look at the lineup, that's usually where you start. But in the postseason, we know your pitcher and your pitching staff have to be on point. That's what they got in this game.
They did. And I actually wrote an article today for Just Baseball about how bullpen is sort of the Achilles heel of both of these teams in this series. And look, even though they only used 3 pitchers, the last 6 outs were a lot harder to get than the first 7 innings when Manaea was cruising. So I think it was a very big win for the Mets to, yes, avoid some of those arms. Edwin Diaz, who has just been, every other day throwing 2+ innings, he gets a couple of days rest here. That sets the Mets up to potentially be able to clinch this in a game 4.
Yeah, and you go back into that Milwaukee series now, and Jesse Winker gets the home run here. Former Brewer has the helmet throw in Milwaukee. All of a sudden, this is what postseason baseball is about. Someone who, if you're not in the muck with the Mets fans, he's not a name where you're going, oh yeah, this guy can beat us, and yet here he is in the postseason coming up huge.
I think a lot of fans didn't really love the deadline from the Mets, didn't think the Mets did enough. Well, Jesse Winker was the big bat they got, and today he hits a home run. And MLB tweeted out, it took him 25 seconds to round the bases. He really soaked it in.
Yeah, he'll milk it.
He'll milk it. And you know what? When you're at home, you kind of want your batter to do that, because you get the crowd just really engaged. I thought it was really big for the Mets to land the first punch in this game. They landed the first 2 with Alonso's home run and Winker's home run, and they really carried that momentum all the way through.
Okay, now they're leading this series now 2-1. A crucial win in Philly sets them up now to steal home field advantage. How can they close this one out?
Thing I'm most interested in is how do the Phillies play with their backs against the wall? Because Zach Wheeler, are they going to go to him on 3 days rest in an elimination game? Are they going to save him for game 5? I think they might start with Ranger Suarez, but Wheeler could be quick coming out of that bullpen, and that would be huge for the Mets. Because even if they don't win game 4, to me, the goal should be if you end up facing the Phillies in game 5, you don't want to see Zach Wheeler. But obviously, the best way to do that is just to win in game 4. Jose Quintana pitched great when the Mets had their backs against the wall in a elimination game, game 3 of the wild card round. Now he gets the chance to be on the mound for another clincher. We'll see if the Mets can get the job done.
The Mets got after Aaron Nola in this one a little bit, and we've seen Nola come through big for the Philadelphia Phillies. This Mets team, I know the lineup, it's not like they mashed the cover off the ball in this game, 9 hits, though they did get the 7 runs. It has to be just a huge confidence lift for this team to get after a pitcher that, again, we've seen in the postseason really be effective.
The last time they saw Nola in the regular season, the Mets scored, I think it was 5 or 6 runs off of him at Citizens Bank. So I think they carried that into this one. But honestly, the biggest thing for this Mets lineup is Pete Alonso, who really was playing with a lot of the stress of a contract year all season. I think that home run against the Brewers really got the monkey off his back, and all of a sudden his at-bats have been way better. Nola is a guy that Alonso has hit very well in his career, and we saw him get the ball wrong for the Mets again. Now that they have a top 4 of the lineup with Alonso, Rolen, and Lindor at the top of it, I think the Mets have a lineup that can be feared here in the playoffs, and it's just been a different team since Alonso had that huge home run.
Stay up to date on the New York Mets all year long by subscribing to Locked On Sports Today and Locked On Mets on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. Coming up, if the Browns had any sense, they'd sit Deshaun Watson. Deshaun Watson has been bad, and I don't just mean morally, although that's its own important conversation, but on the football field, he's been terrible as a quarterback. Locked On NFL host Tyler Rowland and Lauren Cox say it's time to bench him, even though the Browns won't.
I come to you with my tinfoil hat on because I have a theory brewing about this situation in Cleveland with Deshaun Watson. I don't really think that it's that big of a conspiracy theory at the end of the day, but I think that the reason that the Browns have not benched Deshaun Watson is because the owner, Jim Haslam, does not want to look like a fool. I think when you look at the contract that the Browns gave Deshaun Watson, the guaranteed $230 million, I think it's pretty clear that that move was mandated by the owner. The owner said, you go out and do whatever it takes to get Deshaun Watson. I want a franchise quarterback. And now they will sacrifice a good head coach in Kevin Stefansky. They will sacrifice the culture of the locker room. They may even sacrifice a good general manager in Andrew Berry just to support the owner's bad decision to go get Deshaun Watson. So I think that's why they will not make this move. But if the Browns care whatsoever about the culture of their football team, they need to sit Deshaun Watson right now.
I'm with you 100% that they need to, and that I don't think they will. I'm always just curious, like when it comes to ownership and like, okay, you don't want to be embarrassed by giving up on Deshaun Watson and admitting the mistake that you made. But like, what's more embarrassing, that or continuing to lose football games with that quarterback you put all of your eggs in? Like, is it more embarrassing to say you're wrong or to stubbornly refuse to admit you're wrong while everyone laughs at you for still being wrong?
You know what I would love to see? Kevin Stefanski take a stand. Take a Stefan. No, we're not going to do that. I tried to make a pun and we're not going to make it work. That's okay. But I would like Kevin Stefanski, a 2-time coach of the year, someone who, if the Browns fired him for insubordination, would get a job like within 15 minutes. There'd be 3 teams that would break the Rooney Rule tomorrow to hire Kevin Stefanski. I would love for him to say, you know what? I know that ownership is saying a thing here. I can't do it. I'm going to lose my football team. And it's more important to me to coach for the other guys on this roster the 52 other guys active on game day, plus the practice squad and all the guys on IR. That's more important than placating an owner who never should have given out this contract in the first place, who never should have traded all those picks for Deshaun Watson. We can't turn one mistake into two. I would love for Kevin Stefansky to do that. He just won't. And finally, the Seattle Kraken and Jessica Campbell made history on Tuesday night as she became the first female NHL coach. She was hired by new Kraken head coach Dan Bielsma as they both coached together in the AHL with the Coachella Valley Firebirds. She helped lead the team to back-to-back championship game appearances, though they lost both times to the Hershey Bears. Side note, minor league teams continue to slap. Anyway, Campbell is a proven coach and could very well work her way up to being a head coach very soon. If you're catching this episode after hearing your favorite Locked On show, make sure to subscribe to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss an episode. Also, if you're a new subscriber to Locked On Sports Today, we're here for you with the biggest stories in sports every day. Coming up on the next Locked On Sports Today, will the Tigers grab home field advantage in the ALDS? So at least until tomorrow, stay locked on sports today.
Locked On Podcast Network presents Locked On Sports Today.
Go to our video on demand. Click on sports at the top of your screen. There, you'll find past episodes of Locked On Sports Today, plus other Locked On shows on demand.